Welcome to America at its Best. My name is Rebecca Painter and I'm coming to you live from State Policy Network's annual meeting in Chicago. And I have found Governor Mitch Daniels. I know I'm just as excited as you are. We are here in Chicago with 1,627 people. That's right, it's an all-time record. People from 500 organizations from all 50 states. Governor Mitch Daniels, as many of you know, is a two-term governor from Indiana. He spent the last 10 years as president of Purdue University. He's served in the White House under President Bush, and of course, was an advisor to Ronald Reagan. We are so excited to have found him here at annual meeting. And of course, today's an even bigger treat because there's a lot of federalism all over the agenda here at annual meeting. Governor Daniels, welcome to annual meeting. How has your time been so far?
So far, so good. I've seen a lot of old friends and made a few new friends, and we're gathered around some of the topics I think are most interesting and important. So very, very grateful to be a part of the program.
When you were governor, you took the budget from a deficit to a surplus without raising taxes. You increased government efficiency and transparency. We're living in a country today where that's been a real big challenge for governors. The federal government is encroaching on the states more than ever before, and you're finding it more and more difficult for governors to step up and be heroes, both Republicans and Democrats. Do you think we're going to see a country where a swell of governors will step up and be able to have the guts to do that kind of thing again?
I think so, and I hope so. And honestly, I see governors, some in both parties, who are, I think, performing very, very well in stark contrast to what we have seen, unfortunately, at the national level, who are, this will be something I want to talk to the crowd about today. I think one of the great hopes for our country is examples in the states of both competent, confidence-inspiring performance, which I think, regardless of one's philosophy, we owe the free people of a country governed by consent of the governed. But also I see governors who I think, by virtue of their competence and working on problems of very broad importance, are bringing people together at a time when there's so many centrifugal forces that some natural and some, as we say, man-made, that are driving people apart. So I place my fondest hopes for our future really in the federal system and in those who are going to be operating it.
Are you at liberty to say whose leadership you're most impressed with in the states right now? Or would you rather keep that to yourself, considering the politics of it all?
Well, probably the latter. I'll just say I think there are a lot of examples that I could give you, but I'll just invite the viewers to look around and pick their own.
Fair enough. So with all eyes on D.C., upcoming elections, what would you tell our viewers in terms of why the states are important in this moment?
I would say that the states can and are, in many cases, demonstrating that government should not be an object of contempt, that led properly and responsibly and honestly and in the general interest can play its necessary role for good in making it possible for people to pursue happiness, as the great document chartered our government to do. Unfortunately, it appears it'll be a while, I hope not too long, before Washington begins to set, or someone there begins to set that sort of example. And then constitutionally, I don't mean in the historic sense, I mean in the way it's constituted, the federal government is pretty near hopeless in terms of operating competently, but states are not. You know, there's a reason that when asked, people have a very, very low opinion of the federal government, but tend to have a much more favorable opinion, sometimes very much so, of their state government and its leadership. I think there's never been a time when we had a greater need or opportunity for states to step to the front and show what can be done.
I agree. There is a great need and opportunity right now in the states. So let's talk about that for a moment. You're about to see, when you walk out into this hallway with more than 1,600 people here at annual meeting, that there are 64 think tanks in this network and even more organizations who work alongside them. We're talking investigative journalism, litigation centers, community engagement folks, leadership academies, all in the states to push back against the federal government, put them in their rightful place when they need that check and balance. So how can these organizations, do you think, work more closely with lawmakers as you were when you were governor to make sure that the principles that you care about so deeply, that our viewers care about so deeply, stay alive and check for the future?
Principally by doing what I see so many of them doing already, and that is conceiving and bringing to the attention of people in a position to implement them positive policies, forward-looking policies. There's always going to be a need, or I hope not always, but there's certainly a need today to prevent bad things from happening and to litigate, for instance, or to try to displace people and policies which would limit human freedom and infringe on human dignity. But that can't be enough. It just simply can't be enough to identify what's wrong and rail against it, try to reverse it. And so I always thought that the great opportunity, and greater now maybe than in the 10 years ago when I served, is to try to fashion and then present in a constructive, I hope, appealing way to people, policies that empower and respect and lift up and affirm human dignity, people's opportunity to make their own choices about where their kids go to school and how and what they are taught and what health care they will choose and how much of it, and on and on. So that's why I was excited to be invited. My exposure to some of the member organizations has been uniformly positive, and I do see them doing that. And the best and I think most effective lawmakers and administrators will be eager and hungry for those ideas. You know, they won't be serving, many people do, just for the fun of doing it. You know, Ronald Reagan used to say, some people seek high positions to be something, but the best seek it to do something. And you find those people and bring them a new and better idea and watch the alacrity with which they try to take it forward.
What do you think Ronald Reagan would say if he were here right now?
One thing I think he would say is quit talking about me. It was never about him, and he would say, look to America's future. I say this, you can't find a more passionate. I mean, I served him for years, utterly absorbed his view of the world and his approach to public life. But I do believe he would say America's always kept its eyes on the future, and we can't be backward looking. Now, that said, I think he would remind America about what's been special about our past. He would, and I'm sure I'm going to mention this when I talk to the larger group today, he would look ahead to our 250th anniversary and say, let's celebrate that in the right way, in the way that many people are going to try to celebrate in what I believe is a wrong and distorted and negative way. But let's make certain that we try to use opportunities, and that's a great one, to remind Americans, for all our problems and the way we've gotten sort of at each other in very unfortunate fashion, that we've got something very precious here. And with its imperfections, something far better than anything you'll find elsewhere. And so let's remember that, and then let's figure out how to advance the success of this exceptional country in its next era.
Tell me something people should be optimistic about.
Well, that our economy, with all the encumbrances that the federal government keeps trying to put on it, continues to outperform the world. It's doing it again right now. I have to confess that I rather expected, with higher interest rates and some of the other problems that we had, that we'd see at least a mild recession. So far, we haven't. And so it's a marvel that the dynamic American economy, even hobbled as it is, continues to be the envy of the world, and if we could stop hobbling it, that'd be just imagine what it might do. One thing that I'm very optimistic about, honestly, is a federal judiciary which has begun to tell the federal government, no, sorry, you don't have the authority to do these things.
I am optimistic about that too.
It's enormously
Yes.
important. You know, a couple of other, in this very momentous Supreme Court year that we've had, a couple of other cases got probably more attention, but I thought that the cases that dealt with overreach by federal agencies over the long term are probably, might prove to be much more important, and I hope they are followed up by similar cases which essentially tell Congress, if you think these are good ideas, you have to have the courage to vote for them. You can't just lob the ball over the fence, pay little attention while regulators run wild and run beyond their lawful remit, you know, while you go off and try to, you know, busy yourself getting off the next jazzy tweet or press release.
Agreed, and many of those cases tie right into SPN's Center for Practical Federalism, which you will be involved in more later at annual meeting. So, last question, I know we are short on time because you're a very busy man here on site. You have served in just about every level of government. Thank you, by the way, as I think all of us watching are so grateful for your service.
People are always saying, and I've said, no need to thank a person for doing what they were hired to do.
Well, we are all grateful nonetheless. What is your advice for anybody serving in any level of government, or for any citizen who's just wanting to try and make their community a better place in terms of just getting involved, in terms of their mindset, or how they could make the country a better place?
First of all, be sure you can answer the why question. I've told, well, lots of young people who are enthusiastic about doing something in this area, great thing. I always tell the younger people, first go get some experience at something, business ideally, or a profession, and build a little credibility, maybe a little bit of financial independence, but don't jump right in, as easy as that is to do. But then, more generally, I would say, as I've said to them, you ought to be able to answer the why am I doing this question. And I should not be in the answer. I'm not disrespecting people who say, I have a passion for this, or I always wanted to serve. That's great. But that's not enough. Why is your town, or your county, or your state, or your school district going to be better? You know, what needs improvement? And hopefully those things, you can identify 2 or 3 things that you would at least want to start on. And hopefully they are things that affirm, again, the value of individual people, and liberate them if that's necessary, empower them if that's possible. But always bear in mind that government's just the means to an end. That end, we hope, is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so I try always to encourage, I've started some endeavors to try to encourage people of very different backgrounds to consider some public service at some time, but I think you have to come at it from that direction.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for being here with us today.
I've enjoyed it, and thank you for having me.
Thank you all for taking the time to join us for America at its Best. We'll see you for the next episode.